I'm hoping the Big Ten has to modify their system for us.
Probably like getting grade 10 sandpaper rubbed on your face every day.
I mean, we say it all the time, whether, there's two types of turds, you're a sinker or you're a floater, but you're still a turd, right? I
mean, we are about players and players playing the plays and not necessarily the plays.
Welcome to the Varsity Club podcast. My name is Derek Peterson. Joining me this week, I have two of Hail Varsity's best writers. Your favorite writers from Hail Varsity? Everybody at Hail Varsity is really good. But Brandon Vogel, our fearless leader. Brandon, hello. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I wake up every morning and look out of the window in our living room and curse the Chicago sky for not giving me snow. It hasn't happened yet. I would like to have snow for Christmas. But I guess, anybody that is listening to this that knows that I just moved to Chicago would be like, dude, just savor this moment. Just wait for it.
In my experience, having lived in Boston for 9 years, it's never when you want it to snow. It's never a beautiful, perfect snow for Christmas. It's like, get through Christmas. And I don't know about you, but I personally have a letdown. I really like Christmas. And then the day after, you're like, well, that's another year away now. And that's when it will snow in January when nothing is happening and it'll just make you miserable. Yeah. So look forward to that. Merry Christmas to you.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Steve Marik is also with us. Steve, hello. How are you?
Hello, Derek. Hello, Brandon. Good to be here.
Steve, how are the Kings doing? You want to talk about them? Or we're going to keep this strictly a positive podcast?
I'm super glad you asked that. Just last night, great win over the Magic. They really played well. De'Aaron Fox, 33 points. He an efficient 12 of 18 from the field, I believe. It's going well. Alvin Gentry, interim head coach. I think they're 5-3 under him. So good job, Alvin.
Who is the better lead guard, or who has the bigger upside of the two lead guards between De'Aaron Fox and the other guy whose name I'm completely blanking on now? The Iowa State kid.
Tyrese Haliburton.
Thank you.
Tyrese Haliburton for sure. Okay. I think he's just he's a better playmaker. We'll see with the jump shot in his career, but I'd go with Tyrese. He's really, really good.
His jump shot is my favorite thing to watch because it's the most unorthodox thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And I really like unorthodox jump shots.
It looks so terrible. It's a push. He's pushing it the entire way, but whatever. Sometimes it goes in, so that's good.
Michael Kidd-Gilchrist was painful to watch coming out of Kentucky a few years ago when he was playing for the Hornets. Painful. But I was always fascinated by it because, like I said, I'm fascinated by unorthodox jump shots. Guys, I have you here to talk about the big news of the week. Nebraska, after the job being open for a little more than 3 weeks, has an offensive coordinator. It has an offensive line coach. Since we last recorded this podcast, it has hired a wide receivers coach. Mickey Joseph is in town from LSU. Mark Whipple is going to be the OC. He comes over from Pitt. And then Donovan Raiola is coming over from the Chicago Bears to coach the offensive line. We'll talk about Raiola in a little bit. If you guys have thoughts on Joseph, we can get to that later. I want to start this conversation with Mark Whipple because he's the big one. He's the offensive coordinator. He's the quarterback's coach. He's going to call plays for Scott Frost. I guess let's just start with an initial reaction when it was announced. You guys probably heard his name getting tossed around as we got kind of close to the announcement. It seemed like it was something that kind of came together pretty quickly. He wasn't a name that I think was on a lot of people's lists whenever this whole thing started. But he's the guy now. So I guess when you realized Mark Whipple is going to be the guy, what was your initial reaction? Brandon, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised. And I think he was one of those people where what Pitt did this year would have put him on a lot of lists, but he's got 40 years coaching history under his belt. And, he's kind of been an East Coast guy for the most part. I mean, he was at Miami for a short spell and then in the NFL. But I think he's one of those guys that because he's been a coach for so long, people tend to think of those guys as pretty happy where they're at. And, they're not looking to move up the ladder. They can be really, really selective. So my interpretation was that might have been a little bit of why it took them took a while for his name to kind of bubble up in association with Nebraska. Pitt also had to go and win an ACC championship, so they got that done as well. But it's good. I think the major play here for Nebraska, and I'm sure we'll get into more depth with this, but I think the major play is that experience angle. He is an experienced coach. He's been a head coach on multiple occasions, and I think that has the potential to be pretty good for the Huskers.
Steve, what about you? What was your initial reaction?
Yeah, my initial reaction was, yeah, that's okay. But then my mind went right away to Nebraska's quarterback room and a Mark Whipple offense, and just kind of thinking about, like, does Mark Whipple have a Kenny Pickett on the Husker roster, or does he need to go out and get him one? So that's just where my mind went. But yeah, I mean, Pitt had an incredible year. Kenny Pickett, obviously everybody knows what he's done with being a Heisman Trophy finalist and the kind of career arc that he's had. It's been really special and really fun to watch, especially this year and having it all pay off this year. But yeah, I really love what Brandon mentioned about the experience factor. I think that's exactly what Scott Frost's staff, especially on the offensive side, needs, is a guy like that with over 40 years of experience coaching at a lot of different levels, just to have that experience there to, like, kind of pick his brain and see what he thinks about things. It's going to really help, I think, Scott develop as a head coach himself.
Yeah, so here's the skinny on Whipple. He's 64 years old. He's got 30 years of play calling experience. He won an FCS title. He coached Ben Roethlisberger and won a Super Bowl. He's been a head coach. He's been an offensive coordinator at a Power 5 level. He's been an offensive coordinator at ACC with Miami, and then obviously back in the ACC with Pitt. If Frost was looking for a veteran offensive coordinator with experience calling plays, someone that he felt like he could trust, Whipple checks every single box. And in that regards, I'm kind of surprised that he wasn't a name that made sense sooner in this process. And I'm not talking about for them, because they probably identified him. They had to wait. I'm talking about, like, me. I didn't think he would be a candidate. And then I get to looking at his resume, and I'm like, well, this is like the perfect guy for the situation, because Whipple's been a coach for so long. He's had success at numerous spots. He can afford to take this 1 year risk. He can afford to come to Lincoln and say, yeah, we're going to try to make this work. And if it doesn't work and Scott Frost gets let go after the 22 season, I don't think Whipple's career is shot. Like, I think people would still be like, all right, we'll still hire this guy. I mean, the track record is what it is. The offense at Pitt this year was obviously explosive. 43 points per game, third nationally. The offense the 3 years prior is interesting to look at if you look at it from a rushing perspective. In 2020, they averaged 3.4 yards per carry, 108th nationally. They averaged 35 rushing attempts a game, 74 plays a game. So when he got to Pitt, the tempo picked up. They were running more plays a game. This season, they've actually run more plays than anybody else in the FBS so far. In 2019, they averaged 3.5 yards per carry. In 2018, the year before Whipple got there, they averaged 5.6 yards per carry. They ran it 41 times a game in the season prior to Whipple's arrival. His first year, they ran it 34 times. Second year, they ran it 35 times. He's been a pass-heavy coordinator at Pitt. Looking at Miami, they ran it a little bit more than they passed it. But guys, do you think that this is a situation where Whipple is coming over and what he can provide Frost from a passing concepts standpoint in terms of developing a game plan and calling plays in game will complement what Frost can do in the run game? Because Frost's whole thing has been about, well, we're going to combine, the Oregon speed with Husker power, and we're going to be able to run the ball. And he clearly likes to run the ball and sees the value in running the ball. Or do you think that there is reason to be concerned about Whipple's lack of success, of crazy success, rushing the football at his previous stop? Steve?
Yeah, I think he's going to. I just have such high. I hold him in such high regard that all of those years of experience, I think he's really going to come in here, look at the roster, look at the talent that he has, and adjust what he does to it. So like, I guess, is he going to come into Lincoln and he's going to try to do exactly what he did at Pitt last year, like this year? I don't really see that happening. I think he's going to look at who he has at quarterback. He's going to look at his offensive line and how Donovan Raiola really does work there, how much development he's done on the offensive line. Because I think really at the end of the day, it really starts with the offensive line and how much better they're going to improve. And if they can do that, and from there you build off of the run game and the pass game. And I guess I just see it going that way.
Brandon, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the kind of either or that you set up is really the whole game. Like, can they marry this? Because Nebraska's offense did a lot of good things. And obviously Pitt's did, particularly this year. One of the interesting things about Pitt this year, they're up over 40 points a game this season. When Whipple got there, that was a really run-heavy Pittsburgh offense, and he kind of ripped the Band-Aid off right away. They threw the ball 58% of the time about in that year one scenario, but that rush rate creeped up as Pitt got better as a passing team, at least from a yards perspective. So that was interesting. I think just in addition to how much a coach with his level of experience has seen, I also think with the coach who is kind of the consummate football lifer, you get a little bit more willingness to be like, at this point, I don't care about like putting my stamp on this thing. Like, let's just figure out a way to win some football games. When you go the kind of experience route versus the bold up and comer, it may seem a little bit less exciting. If you're just a fan, Willie Korn was a name that was associated with this. And that immediately carries some intrigue, right? Like, we've seen what Coastal Carolina's been able to do. It's kind of an exciting blend of these option concepts for a modern spread era. And you're like, okay, well, this could be the next big thing. You're not getting the next big thing with Whipple, but you might be getting just a willingness to say, hey, let's figure out what it takes to win some games. And I think that's the key advantage.
Yeah, the thing with their profile, their offensive profile this specific season, is that they weren't like tearing it up from a yards per play standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, but they put points on the board. And what it takes to win games is putting points on the board. They averaged 43 a game, third nationally. Nebraska was sixth in yards per pass attempt. They averaged about a half a yard better per pass than Pitt did, with a Heisman Trophy contender at quarterback, with a Heisman Trophy finalist at quarterback. Yards per play, Pitt ranked 22nd, Nebraska ranked 23rd. So it's not like they were, drastically better moving up and down the field than Nebraska was. The thing that they were a lot better at under Whipple than Nebraska has been. And Steve, I'm going to pull this number from a piece that you did on HailVarsity.com. So people should go read that. In Whipple's 3 years at Pitt, the Panthers had 41 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in the red zone. Nebraska threw 14 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in that time frame. One of the criticisms of this year was that, at least early on, it looked like Nebraska was scared to throw the ball in the red zone. Whipple, 41 touchdowns in the red zone in 3 years. That's a big number. Steve, what were your thoughts on that when you found that number?
Well, I want to thank Brandon because he's the one that kind of led me to that stat. But again, what my mind keeps going back to, and again, that's great. In the off to be that efficient in the red zone with passing, it just opens up the offense so much. So credit to him. But I just keep thinking about how it's going to go at Nebraska if he tries to do that with who's throwing the football, right? Because let's just say, like, if Nebraska played a game right now, Logan Smothers would be the one out there. Are we confident in Logan doing that in the red zone and maybe throwing as much as Pitt did in the red zone? I guess it remains to be seen how effective he can be and how efficient he can be doing that, just because we haven't seen much of Logan Smothers. I don't think it's fair to label Logan one way or the other of whether he's capable of doing that or not, being the type of Kenny Pickett passer at Nebraska. But yeah, it's really impressive what Whipple's offense was able to do efficiency wise, like in the red zone with, I mean, if you're able to throw it and run it down there, that's so cool. I mean, Lubick talked about that midway through the season when we asked him about the red zone struggles. He said that, it's great if you could run the ball, but to be able to pass it also and give the defense that extra thing to think about, that's great. But as you could see with the Huskers this season, it was really one-dimensional. They at times looked afraid to throw it with Adrian.
Yeah, I think part of what stands out to me about that passing number in the red zone is, and I agree with Steve, like Kenny Pickett is not coming with Mark Whipple, but the part of it that I do think is potentially a little bit portable is to have that level of success throwing the ball in the red zone, because most coaches you talk to will tell you like a lot of red zone success comes down to being able to run it. And I think it's why every year you see the service academies traditionally have pretty high red zone scoring numbers because they don't have to change their offense at all. Like they just keep running what they've been running for the 50 yards it took to get there. So winning that often in the red zone while throwing the ball tells me it was pretty conceptual more than, I mean, Pitt had some talented receivers, but it wasn't just, we threw like 30 fades and we kind of hit all of them. It's strong kind of play calling and play design, in my opinion, to have that level of success down there where things get really compressed and it becomes easier for a defense to defend most of the field.
So what you're saying is they're not throwing swing passes left and right and getting called for holding penalties.
Pretty much. I haven't gone back. I haven't gotten the cut up. My cut up guy hasn't gotten back to me. I asked him for all of Pitt's red zone passing plays. Might be another couple days on that, but I'm going to assume that that's probably the case. You got to be pretty intentional to hit that number.
Conceptual is a phrase. So Sam McEwen had a good piece on Whipple as well for the Omaha World Herald. He had a line in there from a former quarterback that he talked to where the quarterback said, "I never had a game where I didn't go in knowing everything I was going to see from a defense." And that kind of stood out to me as something that, did Nebraska have that this year? There was a lot of talk, at least early in the season, about, they gave us stuff that we weren't prepared for. That's been something that's happened before. I guess, how do you feel about this notion that Frost is going to hand the offense off, that Frost is not going to be super hands-on, and that this is going to be Whipple's thing to kind of run to, and people are going to just roll their eyes, to whip into shape?
I think it's less of a concern with a coordinator like Whipple. Had they chosen to go, or had they had to go the younger route, I think it becomes tougher for Frost to give that up. And I think it's still going to be a process. I'm sure there's going to be moments, particularly early next year, where, it's kind of a high leverage down or a third down, a red zone attempt where Frost is like, "Oh God, I know what I want to do here, but I gotta let him do what he's going to do." So I think it'll be a process, but going this way probably made that as frictionless as it could probably be, in my mind.
From everything I have, I guess, known, and since I've been around Scott and just listened to how he's done everything, I find it really hard. And I know the CEO, Trev Alberts, wants to have him take some of the offensive duties off of his shoulders and put it on the OC. And that's good and great and everything. But I just have a hard time seeing a guy who's made his career off of offense and calling these great plays at great times, that got him head coaching opportunities at Central Florida and now in Nebraska. I find it really hard for him just to give that up. So I, like Brandon said, I think it's going to be a process, and just start of the season and on, of just them two putting their heads together, creating some trust there. I guess getting on the same page of what they want to do in certain situations. I think it's going to be a process, and I don't think he's going to hand it over right away.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember with Frost, he's still a young head coach. I mean, he's not an experienced head coach in any way. So, there are still times where I think new situations pop up and he has to try to figure out how to navigate them on the fly. That's not to defend him, but it is to sort of set up. I think this marriage can be pretty interesting. If it's only for a year, whatever, because Whipple has been around so long and he has seen so much. And, Frost could have maybe gone with a guy like Graham Harrell, who he probably would have trusted just as much to run the offense, because Graham Harrell is an up and coming name in the business. But if it came down to one of those like high leverage situations, like what Brandon was talking about, I wonder if maybe just the fact that Whipple is like 20 years his superior, that Frost is going to be, there's going to be maybe something in him that says, no, I got to trust this guy. Whereas if he had gone with a name like Korn, with a name like Harrell, if maybe it's a little bit easier to just kind of take over in situations like that. And that's probably the good word, easy. Like, how easy is it to just take over from Mark Whipple? It's probably not going to be as easy as if he would have gone with another guy. And, I think, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm kind of curious what he does with his time if he's not full-time handling the offense. I'm curious, like, what he turns to, because Nebraska has, I think, as of recording this Thursday afternoon, Nebraska has a running back coach position left to fill. And unless there's going to be some shifting of defensive assignments, that running back guy will have to handle special teams, or somebody else would have to handle special teams who's coaching another position. And it's not going to be much of a change from last year, at least structurally. And so, I just kind of wonder, like, what is Frost going to be doing? And I think that there's, this is just my hypothesis, that there's going to be a slightly better comfort level with, for him, knowing that Whipple is in charge of it, as opposed to like the up and comer, the Willie Korn, the Graham Harrell, the Anai guy from Virginia. I guess, do you guys agree with that?
I do. I think it's really going to benefit Scott. Like I was talking about earlier with him growing as a head coach, because like you said, Derek, he doesn't have a lot of experience, many years under his belt of being a head coach compared to others around the country. So I think that just having that, 64-year-old guy in there who's been a head coach, winningest head coach in Massachusetts history, 2 stints there, been a quarterback coach, has coached guys like Ben Roethlisberger, Donovan McNabb, guys like that. It's got to be really tough for him, like you were saying, to like go into the headset and be like, oh no, let me have this one, Mark. I'll take this. I'll take this one. So I think it's going to be really, really beneficial for Scott to just hand it over and maybe stick your head in the special teams room, the linebackers room, the tight ends room with Becton. Having Becton in there too, along with Whipple, that's got to be cool. Just so much experience to learn from and talk to. So I think it's going to be beneficial for them. Yeah, and better than the young up and coming hot name. I think that's like, look, I'm a Coastal fan, but like, would Willie Korn be the best thing for Scott Frost right now? No, I'm big enough to admit that. So,
yeah, I think I saw something that said Kenny Pickett would not have come back to Pitt if Whipple hadn't asked him to, and if Whipple hadn't been there. And you look at sort of Pickett's career arc and the way that he sort of developed. Could you call Whipple a teacher? And if so, then did Frost need a teacher?
I mean, possibly. I think it's not that long ago. I mean, so 7 years ago, 6 football seasons ago, Frost basically was Graham Harrell. So I think, to your point, Derek, or Steve's point too, like, if the pick had been him, it becomes very easy to then, like, for the head coach to be like, I've been you. And it wasn't even that long ago. And 2 or 3 years before that, Frost was basically kind of where Korn was at in his career. He hasn't been where Whipple has been. So I think it does make it more likely, make it a little bit easier to defer. And, I guess we would have had a totally different conversation if Nebraska had chosen a different offensive coordinator, but they didn't. And I think this kind of forces a change that Scott Frost probably needed to make anyway, because he's been so closely tied with offense for his entire career, which is good. He's really, really good at it. The last 2 games of Nebraska's season kind of showed that, hey, that hasn't faded, as Nebraska hasn't been able to get on track as a team. But if you're just really good at offense, you're kind of eternally just that brilliant offensive coordinator, right? So it's no guarantee that this is going to, that Whipple's going to come in and this is all going to work perfectly. But I think it gives them the greatest chance, and it's something that needed to happen one way or the other. And maybe this was the only way to really make sure it happens going into 2022.
It's interesting that this, I think if he had hired Korn or Harrell, I think the response from like social media, the response from fans, I think would have been maybe a lot more ecstatic, maybe. I asked people on Twitter to respond with a GIF of their immediate knee-jerk reaction. And I was kind of going through, and it was about 40-40 split, people being super excited and people just being like, all right. I mean, okay. There were a couple that I had absolutely no clue what their GIF was trying to say. There were a handful of people that seemed generally unhappy. There were about 10 people who said, I don't care. I literally just want them to win football games. I don't care who does it. But I think the split between the like, we'll see, was interesting. It's kind of Whipple. I wanted to open this podcast by playing the Watch Me Whip song, Nene. And I was like, no, we don't have Cam here, so I can't, it wouldn't be good audio. It would be terrible. And, we'll just move on. Donovan Raiola, let's talk about him for a minute, because this is a significantly different hire than the one that Frost made with Whipple. This seems like a risky hire. This seems like certainly an upside play. There is a future prospect who could potentially be impacted by this decision, which we can get into if you guys want to, which in this recruiting world, of course that's part of it. Of course that's part of it. But it's a risk nonetheless. This is Donovan Raiola's first FBS coaching job. He's been with the Bears. So he's been on an NFL staff, but he's been with the Bears. So, I think Jacob made the joke that offensive line should be charged with what they did to Justin Fields this season, or what they have been doing to Justin Fields this season. So, I don't want to take anything away from Donovan Raiola, because it sounds like he nailed his interview, which, for weeks, that's what I was saying. I was saying, don't hire the person that you're friends with, hire the person that comes in and knocks your socks off in the interview. Sounds like that's what they did. It's just still a risky play. Brandon, how did you feel about the Raiola hire?
Yeah, it's one you really have to focus on the intangibles with, because, he's young, he's early enough in his career that there's, Whipple, we could go through his career year by year, and it would take us until the season rolls around. Might polish that off before the Huskers head to Ireland. But with Raiola, like, it really comes down to he played at Wisconsin, which is good, right? If you're an offensive lineman, under Barry Alvarez, and he was a good offensive lineman there. You've got the Dominic Raiola connection. I believe he was still Nebraska's last All-American on the offensive line. So that's good. It should be kind of in his blood or in his bones, good offensive line play. But I mean, I'm trying to remember what exactly, Steve, maybe you recall what exactly his roles were, but he's never even been a person in the college level who's been allowed to go out and recruit, right? He was just kind of he was never a full-time assistant coach, one of the 10 spots, was he?
Yeah, so I have his job roster up here. So he was a high school coach back in Hawaii for 2012 and 13. Then he went to the University of Hawaii, Go Bows, as an intern in 2014. And then from 15-16, he was a grad assistant at Notre Dame. And then 2017, he spent one season as an O-line coach at Aurora University, which I think is Illinois. And from there, just Chicago Bears as the assistant O-line coach under a really good full-time head coach at Chicago, from what I read. So.
Yeah, so that kind of for me, like the technique piece of it, I'm confident enough that he should be coming from a pretty good spot. It's just coaching college football, getting your first full-time assistant college job at this level with where Nebraska's at and the urgency, it clearly has to feel. It's a big play. So I think you're right, Derek, and I do like that piece of it. Like, he must have bat flipped after that interview, because there would have been much more kind of experienced options to go for here.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, he would seem young enough, he would seem energetic enough to where I don't know that you should necessarily be worried about his ability to recruit. He just hasn't done it yet. So, to your point, we'll kind of see with that. I think it is worth pointing out, though, that this staff has a number of well-established connections to the state of Hawaii. That's something that has seemingly been important to Frost over his coaching career. It's where he got Mariota. It's where he got Mackenzie Milton. Dylan Gabriel was from Hawaii, was he not? Yeah. Maybe that it serves to produce something, maybe not, but I think that connection is important to them, and this hire certainly strengthens those relationships that they have in Hawaii. Steve, how do you feel about it?
So I view Whipple as like kind of like what you're getting. Like, he's been around for so long, like you just know you're getting a pro. I don't really feel that with Raiola, just because he's so young. The resume isn't long at all, but he's getting a start, and I'm with you. I think he's going to do okay, I guess, on the recruiting trail, just because he's young, he's energetic, he might connect better with recruits. But yeah, I just would have liked to see somebody with a little bit more experience, like kind of like who's done it before, someone more like Whipple, to take over, to be tasked with fixing, I guess, one of the offense's biggest, most glaring issues is the offensive line and protecting a quarterback. So he's not looking over his shoulder the whole time during a play. But it is what it is. The Raiola connection with Dylan, the 2024 highly touted recruit, that's great and everything. But with the urgency needed now, I think that's so far down the line. But like, of course, you always got to recruit. 24/7 is recruiting these days. But yeah, I just think that the recruiting aspect of this with Dylan, his nephew, is so, it's important, but not that important right now. I think the issue is just like, who's even going to be your center? Is Cam Jurgens coming back? Is he declaring for the NFL? What's the deal with the two tackles, Turner Corcoran, Bryce Benhart? That's the biggest issue right now. And I just would have liked to see somebody with a little bit more resume to the name, I guess.
There's a lot of noise about Cam going to the NFL. Brandon, do you think that's a smart move, or do you think he needs another year?
I think it could go either way. Like, if he came out, now and said, "Yep, that's what I'm doing," be like, "Okay, yeah, that makes sense." I think he has a chance to put himself in a really good spot with another year. I mean, he's still pretty young in terms of, just playing that position. Unlike, the guys he'll be kind of competing with for draft spots. Just his time there hasn't been as long as those. So it's not a slam dunk for me that, he has to come back, because clearly I think he's got the interest and the upside and what he's been able to show through 3 seasons. But it would mean a great deal for Nebraska if they did get him back. And I think the fact that And that noise has been out there for a while now. The fact that we haven't heard a decision yet at least gives Nebraska a little bit of hope that maybe they will have their starting center in 2022.
Yeah, it certainly gives Raiola time to, I guess, re-recruit him or kind of sell him on the vision for what he has and what they can do, and Whipple to an extent as well. I kind of look at it, I'm like, maybe you guys think I'm crazy for this, but I could see Cam going to the combine and just completely wowing everybody with his athleticism. And maybe a team says, look, we don't care about the snapping. We're going to turn him into a guard. And he's a 3rd-round pick. There is a world where I could see that happening, and a not too like far out there world where I could see that happening. Steve, looks like you're going to say something.
I don't think you're crazy at all. I think he's going to kill it with like the combine testing. Like
Yeah.
He's an incredible athlete that was a 4-star tight end coming out of Beatrice, got moved to offensive line, and just has been putting on this weight throughout his career. But he's still, I mean, we've seen him like pull on some of those plays. I mean, that dude gets out there. He's on his horse. That's so valuable. And when I watch like other linemen across college football, like Tyler Lindenbaum, the center from Iowa, sticks out to me. Just the way he pulls, and he's so fast and getting out in front of the ball carriers. It's such an asset to have that I think, I mean, you're right. Like there's got to be an NFL scouting department that's just like kind of looking at Cam Jurgens going like, yeah, we take that. We can turn him into something. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, because I mean, what have we been saying about this guy for really the last 2 years? And what has Frost been saying about him since they moved him to center? He said that he's the best blocker on the team in terms of pure blocking ability. And for the last 2 years, we said, well, when the snap is on target, he's crushing dudes. It's just the snap that you're worried about. And so if there's an NFL team that's like, look at this dude's combine numbers, we could snap him up in the 3rd round and have a really good guard for us. You know, Nebraska's in tough shape if that happens, because you know, they've not done enough since moving Cam to center to build depth behind him at center. They've just cycled guards over there and given them backup reps and said, well, you know, this is what happens, which is probably part of the reason why they've been so reluctant to move off of Cam at center as he struggles, because they just didn't have anybody. So, you know, that'll be really interesting. The thing about Dylan, the 2024 quarterback, you know, there's no guarantee that this staff is here recruiting him when it's time to recruit him. And so from that side of it, like these 2 hires feel like they're hires made on different timelines, which is really interesting to me, because if you view Raiola as an upside hire, a guy in a 1-year window making an upside hire would seem to signal the guy thinks that he's not in a 1-year window, right, Brandon?
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I view it as totally a 1-year window either. I mean, they can't go 3-9 or even 4-8, or they probably can't have a losing record again. But
I saw someone say he should get 2 more years minimum because of these 2 hires to see what it looks like. I've seen that already.
I don't think the hires alone do that. It all comes down to context and do you make progress? So we know about Nebraska's, close game record, and Nebraska could trot out an entirely new team, and with that just coming, well, it wouldn't be entirely new, but Nebraska could have just kind of natural attrition and come back. When you lose that many games by 1 score, like it's very rare for teams not to get some of that back the following year. It's not guaranteed to happen, but it's rare. Like Nebraska's win total is probably going to be, when they open those up for the 2022 season, it's going to be in the 6 range. And if they just, win all the games they should and don't lose the games that they shouldn't win, 6-6, that probably does get you a second year. I mean, I think, but again, it all depends on how things look. And so the Raiola thing could be an indication that, the coaching staff isn't going into this as we've got to do it next year. And that's all that there is, which I think is a good thing. It also might be as simple as kind of, diversifying your portfolio a little bit. If you've got a Whipple that is the stock that's, not going to make you rich at the end of the year, but you're pretty much guaranteed you'll be a little bit higher, and it's not going to go lower. Raiola becomes the one that, hey, maybe this one goes super, super high because we're in early on it. And
again, this is how assistant coaches get their start, is they get a position like this and they blow it out of the water. So like there's, I'm not sitting here saying that, and I don't think either of you are as well, that Raiola is not going to work because he hasn't done this before. That would be crazy because, we've seen it happen before. The quarterback thing becomes so important because, Brandon, you talking about win totals, like depending if they went and got a transfer quarterback, could you see their win total sitting at like 7.5 in FPI with the new season? Like, let's just say they bring in the Miles Brennan kid from LSU, and you look at what they have at skill talent. You look at what they've got defensively. They're losing a lot defensively, but what they've got skill talent with the quarterback with Whipple, could you see them being like 6-7.5 range up in there?
7.5 might be high. I could see 7 though. I mean, that's kind of where they're, from an analytical standpoint, that's kind of where they start 2022, because most of the models that are out there, Nebraska should have won 7 games this year. So if you got a high profile quarterback and then you kind of deduct from that the losses on defense and whatever kind of attrition is going to happen, you probably end up in the 6.5, 7 range. I don't think that's crazy. Someone like Miles Brennan could get you that. The quarterback at Incarnate Word, who just entered the transfer portal, probably doesn't get you that, but he's pretty good. Somebody's going to get a steal there.
Let's just all read too much into Spencer Rattler's Twitter followers and bump this thing up to 9. Steve, what are your thoughts on all of this that we've been talking about?
Yeah, I'm not a huge like betting spread guy, like for just determining like wins and stuff. But like the quarterback situation for me is going to be really interesting. I really liked Miles Brennan. Super bad luck with him with all the injuries and stuff in his career while at LSU. But I was also going to bring up Zach Gibson from Akron. Unfortunately had his official visit canceled here this weekend, but somebody's going to get a good one in Zach Gibson, I think. I don't know. Like, I was kind of watching some highlights of him with the old Akron Zips, and it wasn't that bad to my eyes anyway. But yeah.
Did he have zip on the ball?
Yeah, there you go. That's zip on the ball for the
okay,
Zips.
Good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. The quarterback discussion here is going to be super, super interesting, and one to keep an eye on.
I think we've reached a point where if they do not add a transfer quarterback, something went horribly wrong. I
would agree. And I think this isn't one where you can wait until after spring football where there'll be, additional options in the portal. Because of all of the new coaches on the offensive side, you would want that person to be able to come in and compete for that job and kind of learn on a level playing field with everybody else. I mean, it's not like Nebraska's going to throw out its old playbook. At least I don't think so. But it's just getting those reps and getting a longer look at a guy you are able to bring in is pretty important.
Yeah, I think, I'm still, and maybe, actually probably I'm in the minority on this. I just don't know what to make of Logan Smothers at this point. I don't want to take too much from one game where he ran the ball 24 times. Heinrich Harburg is a blank slate. I like him, but he's a blank slate. Let's get Chuba Purdy in here and let's get this thing rolling. Chuba.
I like him. I liked his brother too.
And
I like Brock. Yeah.
His brother's career arc was interesting. He went from super exciting youngster to I saw people calling him overrated. And Iowa State's been super interesting.
Yeah,
but that's an entirely different.
A lot of hype on Iowa State, and they've had the season that they've had. So
yeah, that's an entirely different discussion.
Well, that actually reminds me. That's one other thing that kind of I did flag with Whipple was Sure, they averaged 43 points a game. It took them 3 years to get to that point. Nobody thought much of anything of Kenny Pickett coming into this year. And Steve and I have talked about kind of off pod, like we're pretty certain Nebraska doesn't have that kind of time. So that is the one thing. Like you look at Pitt's 2021 numbers, everything looks great and awesome. But it was a process to get there. And he was coming from a super run heavy offense at Pitt. I think Nebraska's been a little bit more varied, but the quarterback discussion made me think of that.
Well, you look at Pitt's 2020 numbers, 58th nationally in scoring, 96th in yards per play, 88th in yards per pass, 108th in yards per rush. Like it wasn't a prolific offense. You know, maybe people in Pittsburgh that were around the program saw like the makings of what was coming from Kenny Pickett, but certainly no one else did. Which is kind of the way these things go. So we'll see. Any other Mark Whipple, Donovan Raiola thoughts that you guys have that you want to hit on before we move on? No.
I'll just add this on Raiola quick. From the people I've talked to, like I do sense that the enthusiasm level with him getting this job, the enthusiasm level on his end is quite high. So I think you said it earlier, Derek, you know, this is how great coaches, they all got to start somewhere, right? Like they got to get that job. That is an encouraging sign to me of it seems clear right away that this isn't just another stop in the coaching journey. This is a job that matters to him. And I think that probably played a role in why he's there.
And he certainly has a nice set of ears to ask questions of. He's got a nice little support system built for himself if he has any offensive line questions or any Nebraska questions or anything like that. I didn't get to talk about Mickey Joseph on the podcast last week because we recorded, and then the day that the podcast loaded, he was announced as the coach. I am super excited about Mickey Joseph as a wide receivers coach. I'm hella excited, I would say. I thought it was a big moment for Scott Frost to get him after not getting him a year ago. And I think a lot of the excitement stems from his ability to recruit, which we saw like a day later. He was out on the recruiting trail doing stuff for Nebraska. His intensity as a recruiter, he's been one of 247's top recruiters in his career. He's signed a buttload of 4-star players. He's put dudes in the draft. He's developed guys who were not super high profile wide receivers and put them in the draft. Justin Jefferson was a 3-star coming out of high school. And then Mickey Joseph got his hands on him. And now he's, now I don't want to take away from what the guy did, but like Mickey Joseph did well to put him in the NFL. Justin Jefferson's really good, but Mickey Joseph did well. Are you guys as equally excited about the Mickey Joseph hire as I am? Steve, where you at?
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm with you. I've just been glued to Twitter and just like seeing him sling out all these offers to these Louisiana kids. It's great. It's
the coldest to ever do it.
Oh, Dakota's Crawford. Oh my gosh. And another one, Trevante Citizen. That's another cool last name. But anyway, yeah, I mean, what he's doing down there, it's giving Nebraska like a shot of momentum, a shot of juice on social media with these kids too. Cause everybody's like seeing like all the LSU kids decommit after that Brian Kelly hire. And just to have teammates and kids and friends that they know picking up offers from Nebraska about, because everybody knows Mickey Joseph down there. The word has got to get around that, wow, this guy is like trying to build something, trying to like get all these kids up there and just kind of like be the guy down there. I think that's kind of cool. And I think recruits are seeing it as kind of a cool thing too. Now, I'm not saying he's going to go down and like rack up any of these commits from these kids, but it's a start. And like, I don't know, I think it just gives the program a shot of momentum and kind of opens these eyes from these Louisiana kids that like, hey, Nebraska could be an option. So
Brandon, on the excitement scale, with the low end being opening act Scrooge in the Christmas Carol, and the high end being hella, which I don't think I've ever heard you use the phrase hella before. Where are you at with Joseph?
I would put myself at getting to eat at a restaurant that I've always wanted to eat at, and knowing that like 2 days in advance, because I think that's what Mickey Joseph is. He's the guy who can get you a table at all of the restaurants that are impossible to get a reservation at. And it doesn't mean, like Steve said, that, they're going to land all these guys, but Mickey Joseph opens that door. He says, I can get you in there. And it's just a different level that he's recruited at, that you have to recruit at to compete at the LSU and in the SEC. And you just are around, your circle includes high level players. So it's not just the connections, but then it's being able to connect with those connections that just where you would have been kind of lead you naturally to. So Nebraska's going to be in on some guys, not just this cycle, but I think we'll probably see it even more with the next recruiting cycle of guys who you probably wouldn't have an in with. And that's what hiring a high level recruiter gets you.
Yeah, I think quarterback is obviously going to be the most impactful decision that's made on Nebraska's offense this offseason. Steve, I agree with you in thinking that the offensive line is super important and needing to get it figured out, because I think the offensive line was the reason that they struggled as much as they did this season. But I would think that, like, convincing Xavier Betts that your future is incredibly bright and your future is incredibly bright at Nebraska in a Nebraska uniform, so please stay and be part of this, is like one of the 5 most important offensive jobs this offseason. And like, you just have to feel good about Mickey Joseph's ability to do that. I wrote this in my columns, not going to belabor the point, but him walking into that wide receiver room, I would have to imagine that all of those guys in there are super excited. Alante Brown, Omar Manning, Xavier Betts. I would have to think that they're all super excited to get to work with this guy, right?
I completely agree. I'll add like those young receiver names too, because I mean, you said it, when Mickey Joseph was hired, I immediately thought Xavier Betts, and I immediately thought Omar Manning, and I immediately thought Alante Brown. I'm like, could these guys be on the field at the same time, like next year? Wow, like that could be something, right? But so yeah, I mean, maybe that opens up that possibility and what an offense looks like with all those guys out there consistently getting game reps. And again, like the super young guys, like the first and second year guys, like Sean Hardy, Latrell Neville. I know Latrell Neville had like a heck of a recruiting. A lot of schools were after Latrell Neville coming in. He's like really physically impressive looking guy. I saw him at one of the Friday Night Lights camps, 6'4", like around 200 pounds, but he didn't get any playing time this year. But just having Mickey Joseph come in here, and I've watched videos of him kind of teaching his wideouts on YouTube. He's just a cool dude. I think he's going to really connect more so than any other people who have tried to connect with Nebraska's wideout room guys. So I just think it's a really exciting time to be a Nebraska wide receiver. Now, again, that it begs the question, who's going to be throwing them the ball and how accurate is that guy going to be? But they're working on it, I guess. But just specifically with the wideout room, I think it's incredibly, incredibly exciting.
Brandon?
Yeah, I kind of, in addition to some Nebraska's kind of best options, which we're still waiting to see because they just haven't been on the field consistently enough. You've got some high talent guys in Betts and Manning that this could be the change that makes things click for them a little bit better. But my first thought actually went to, because I really liked Nebraska's wide receivers class last year and didn't see any of them this year, which may end up being a good thing. It's curious now, but may end up being a good thing down the road. Neville and Joseph, I think even, were pretty closely connected in the recruiting process. So that's a bonus. And then you'll probably, it'll be interesting to see, like we've kind of, maybe I'll just speak for myself, not the collective we. This class was kind of a strange one. You just kind of put it over there and be like, yeah, it'll be like 13 guys because that's the reality of it. But with all of the change, with the departures that we already know about that are official, I'll be interested to see how big this class goes, because I think they're going to have a chance to have some momentum. And on some of that will depend on what they end up doing in the portal too. But I think you're going to have a pretty good amount of new blood in for Nebraska by the time spring football gets here.
Yeah, and the other thing with Mickey, the I guess intensity with which he attacks recruiting. He's going to be he's got the recruiting coordinator title, doesn't he? Am I correct in that?
So the three guys. Oh, go on, Brandon.
Yeah, it wasn't with the initial announcement, but they've only got that one spot still to fill. So it seems like something that could be coming down the road, but because he was the passing game coordinator and associate head coach.
Okay, those are the three. Yeah, the passing game is the one. Okay, well, either way, Ryan Held did a lot of recruiting for them. And the way that they structure their recruiting amongst the assistant coaches is they don't just go based on position. They go based on region. So Mickey Joseph is not going to solely recruit wide receivers for Nebraska. And Ryan Held was a good recruiter. He was one of the top 247 recruiters early on in the Nebraska tenure. And he was a guy that I think, they were going to need to replace what he did for them from a recruiting standpoint. And I think Mickey does that. I think that deserves to be said. One thing I would like to talk to you guys about that I did not prepare you for, that is not Nebraska related, is the Heisman finalist selection. Will Anderson is not a finalist for the Heisman Trophy, despite Alabama lists him with 32.5. Other places list him with 31.5 tackles for loss, a boatload of tackles for loss. He leads the country in tackles for loss. He's got 15.5 sacks. He is not a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. Aiden Hutchinson is at Michigan. Everybody's pissed off that Aiden Hutchinson is a finalist and Will Anderson is not. I am pissed off that CJ Stroud is a finalist and Will Anderson is not. Someone explain to me why CJ Stroud is a Heisman finalist. I understand Bryce Young. He had his moment in the SEC championship. Fine. No one can take Kenny Pickett off the list. I will fight you if you want to take Kenny Pickett off the list. Why is CJ Stroud on there?
Because the numbers are good, but it's actually not even that. So I have a Heisman vote, and I can't tell you who I picked. Otherwise, the Heisman copter will land on my lawn, and like Mike Rozier will bust through my window, SWAT style. They're very serious about not revealing your picks before it has been announced. So I will abide by that. But I really hate the tendency of like the de facto selections are the quarterbacks for the best 2 or 3 teams in the country. I mean, it's just become what it is. And like Bryce Young fully deserves to be there. CJ Stroud put up numbers that are comparable / better than most quarterbacks you should select. But there were times during the season, and this changed with me for Young a little bit, not so much with Stroud, where it just felt like, it was like, well, yeah, this is just what you do. And I hate that the Heisman has that tendency, but it's why the kind of like lists always include those guys, no matter how much football they've played. And they're always right there. So yes, I will say that impacts my voting strategy, which is all I can say about that.
Stroud had 3,800 passing yards. He had 38 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He's there. Fine. Ohio State had a prolific offense. Fine. They have the best wide receiver room that's ever been put together. Fine. Will Rogers had 35 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, better completion percentage, 4,400 passing yards. I think we have reached a point with sort of the offensive evolution in football, some of the rules changes, things like that, where I think we have to reevaluate the way we evaluate quarterbacks. Because I think Kenneth Walker should be there, Aiden Hutchinson should be there, and Will Anderson should all be there. And I think Kenny Pickett should be there too. There's no reason we couldn't have 5 finalists. None. There's no reason we couldn't have 5. They decided that we're just going to stick with 4 going forward. There's no reason for that. There were 5 deserving guys, or probably more deserving guys. And I don't want to be like CJ Stroud did not have a good season. CJ Stroud is not deserving. That's not what I'm saying. Will Anderson deserves to be there in my eyes a little bit more than CJ Stroud does. And I think it highlights the issue when Sue didn't win the Heisman that season, it seemed like, okay, we're never going to get a defensive player to win the Heisman again. It's just never going to happen. If it didn't happen with Sue, it's just not going to happen. And now Will Anderson isn't even a finalist. And it was like, oh, but Aiden Hutchinson is there. So of course it's a defensive award. Feels like we've reached a point where they will put a defender on the list as a token defender to say, no, we did this. Oh, look at this. Bryce Young is going to win the award. He's going to win the award. Aiden Hutchinson's not going to win the award, but he's a finalist. Fine. We put a guy on there. Don't get mad at us. We put a guy on there. There's a defensive guy on there. He technically has the ability to win. It doesn't have to be an either or situation. Like, did Will Anderson have a greater impact on his team's success than CJ Stroud did this season? And with the way football is trending, with how nuts everybody is to try to find a dominant edge rusher like a Will Anderson, like an Aiden Hutchinson, you could maybe argue that he did. Steve, thoughts?
I don't have many thoughts. I'm very I don't have a huge opinion on like award season. Like the Heisman.
No, I need you to get super worked up about this. This is a thing with college football. Yeah, everybody is snubbed. Your teammate is always snubbed. You got to always be mad. No one ever gets it right. You got to have strong emotions one way or the other.
I agree with you that if anybody's going to be taken out, I'm taking out CJ and inserting Will Anderson because I really love watching Will Anderson. I agree with you that Bryce Young is probably going to win. You can't just what he did against Georgia in the SEC championship was too hard to forget. I'm never going to forget that. It's always going to be the quarterback. I don't know what to tell you. They have the ball in their hands the most. That you always see them. They're the most important player on the football team. I just think that it's turned into a quarterback award. And sorry, I don't know. It's a bad answer, but that's just how I feel about it.
I mean, it's not a bad answer because that's like their answer. They're just like, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Like that seems like that's the answer. Like, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. You throw for 4,000 yards and run people out of the gym. Like, this is what's going to happen. I mean, you can't get mad at CJ Stroud for being a Heisman finalist. Like, he completely obliterated Michigan State in a huge game, just completely took them off the field by halftime. So you can't get super mad, but I guess that's my lot in life. I'm getting mad about these things.
I'm disappointed in Steve for not taking up the charge for Grayson McCall. I was sure that was going to happen. But he's right. It's a quarterback award. It does seem, and I'd have to go back and look at the finalists, but it does seem like a defender gets there more often. So I do think some sort of tide is very, very slowly turning, and that I think for some people it becomes a little bit of a protest vote because a defensive player isn't in there. I think you see a few more people each year saying, no, we're trying to change that, but it's not. Running backs and wide receivers don't even win the award very often. It happened last year, but it stood out for that reason. So yeah, unfortunately, it bothers me that there seem to be two big dots: who's the quarterbacks, which teams are good, and a lot of people just draw the straight line there, and that ends up being the Heisman Trophy.
Could we not put the Western Kentucky kid in there? He threw for 5,600 yards and but he's 56 touchdowns.
Yeah, but who's he playing, Derek? Come on, Group of 5 competition. Duh. I'm
gonna call you Kirk Herbstreit from now on.
No, hey, I'm a Group of 5 guy. I love it. I'm just saying what they would say.
Okay, that's fair.
Hey, good hire by Texas Tech, right, for that OC job.
Yeah, definitely. Unless you guys have any other thoughts, I'll let you go. I've had you for a while. I'm sure you both got stuff you got to do. So cool. Thank you both for coming on. I really appreciate it. It was good to talk to you guys.
Thanks, Derek.
We'll be back next week. In the meantime, keep reading HailVarsity.com. Brandon has his own podcast, the ID Preview Podcast. There are also a number of other podcasts that you can listen to, subscribe to, review. We are a proud part of the Hurrdat Media Network. Shouts to you guys for listening every week. Shouts to Cam for producing this every week. Shouts to my 2 guests this week for putting up with my nonsense for an hour. We'll be back next week. Thanks, guys.
A Hurrdat Media Production.